The Legend of Zelda, a game series where up to now, unless you played the 1993 and 1994 CDI games Zelda's Adventure and The Wand of Gamelon, is the first to finally make our title character the one doing the adventuring. In this game you can finally play as Zelda, and it's a very different kind of adventure this time around. Considering this is still quite new, I'm going to avoid major spoilers from later in the game, and apart from a few segments, I'll mostly be using footage from the first few hours. So, with that in mind, let's get into it. So, Echoes of Wisdom starts off where many Zelda games end, with Link fighting Ganon, or what appears to be Ganon, defeating him and saving Zelda. But after Link's victory, a rift appears in the dungeon, consuming Link and everything around him. In a last-ditch effort, Link uses his bow and manages to free Zelda from her cage, and she manages to escape and make her way to Hyrule Castle to warn her father. Unfortunately for Zelda and the people of Hyrule, just as they attempt to put a plan into action, the king, his General Right, and Minister Lefty are all dragged into a rift. Zelda escapes the rift due to her father's quick thinking, but is immediately imprisoned when replicas of General Right, Minister Lefty, and the king all appear and frame Zelda for the appearance of the rifts. These replicas will be some of what we'll learn to call echoes. While imprisoned, Zelda encounters a little creature called Tri, who followed Zelda to the castle after the battle with Ganon. Tri talks to her about the echoes, and gifts her with the Tri-Rod, a scepter that will allow her to create echoes of the objects, enemies, and creatures she'll encounter throughout the game. You then make your escape from your cell, dodging guards and their patrols. You'll be able to create echoes to climb up onto high bookcases and throw pots to distract guards. You'll finally encounter Impa, who thankfully believes you and gives you a disguise that you'll use Link's hood with too. She informs Zelda that the false king is talking of executing her, which I thought was surprisingly dark, so you'll need to make a hasty escape before that happens. Impa takes out a bunch of the guards in impressive fashion, and then stays back so you can escape through the sewers. You escape another rift by jumping into a river, and when you awake, your adventure truly begins. An adventure that will take you to every corner of Hyrule, meeting this game's iterations of the Zora, Gerudo, Gorons, and more. There's plenty of twists and turns, fun boss fights and dungeons, familiar faces and iconic locations to explore. It's a Zelda storyline that I found really charming to play through, and much like many of the others, it felt very bittersweet to finally see it end. This game builds upon what Link's Awakening's remake did, but unlike Link's Awakening, it's not restricted by being a remake of an old Game Boy game. This is an incredibly great feeling game to play. Jumping is no longer an item, it's just a default option, and it adds so much to the gameplay. You can swim straight off the bat, and the trees that usually in games like traditional Zelda and Pokemon no longer restrict you to a specific route. Zelda can stack a bunch of beds and just run across the treetops like Connor Kenway in Assassin's Creed, or like you're using no-clip with an action replay on Pokemon Pearl. It's actually kinda jarring at first, but I genuinely hope they keep this freedom in future top-down Zelda games if they can make it work. This is very much traditional Zelda meets Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, in regards to its freedom of exploration, puzzle solving, and creativity. As you adventure, Tri will get more and more powerful, and it will allow you to summon more and more objects and creatures at once. Summoning an army of bokoblins to fight along Zelda is a bizarre but really fun sight to see. One of your other abilities is actually using the power of the Master Sword to temporarily gain Link's abilities. Starting with the sword itself, and gradually throughout the game, you'll unlock his full loadout from the opening sequence. Zelda plays great, but my god, does this game make Link's gameplay feel fantastic. This without a doubt needs to return. Even if it's in a remake of Oracles or something else, just remake the games to be compatible with this style of gameplay. It feels so fluid, and you feel like you're in a proper scrap at times, jumping out of the way to avoid attacks, blocking with your shield, quick firing your bow, or throwing a well-timed bomb. This version of Link can handle himself, and that's for certain. Using the echoes to traverse the world can be as simple as dropping a few beds to climb the trees, as I previously mentioned, or you can get very creative. Using something like a flying tile will fly you across gaps. Attaching yourself to a spider and switching to follow mode can even help you scale the side of a mountain. Something like a shark echo can help you swim against a current, and if you're being very creative, you can do some pretty cool things. One of the things I tried near the end of the game was using 2 echoes to infinitely fly in one direction. Placing a crow echo and attaching to it, turning around and placing a meat echo, picking it up, switching to follow mode, and the crow will infinitely fly in the direction it's facing, only stopping if you run into an obstacle. I remember seeing this online and thinking hardly, and just like in Tears of the Kingdom, it worked. There's a bunch of fun echo combinations, but that's just one I really loved, just because of how creative people had to be to figure it out. Hyrule in Echoes of Wisdom feels like a hybrid of A Link to the Past and Breath of the Wild, with the layout of the map feeling a little like Breath of the Wild's, and there being several locations in the game recreating areas from A Link to the Past. There's a great thread on Twitter by MetroidMike64 of a bunch of these areas compared to A Link to the Past's equivalents. On top of some similarities, it still feels really unique in its own right. The openness of the world really adds to the exploration. Gone is the restriction of past games, but it still feels like you have structure that guides you and keeps the game from feeling disjointed or like it can be cheesed to finish early. You gain a lot more of the more useful or maybe overpowered echoes later in the game, so they don't affect the early stages of the game at all. You can get yourself a horse that makes getting around the world a bit faster, and you can summon it by placing a carrot echo. And honestly, you might need it, because for a top-down Zelda game, this Hyrule is absolutely massive, with the game's map being around 8 times the size of A Link to the Past. The different races in Hyrule, as usual, all have their own unique looks and aesthetics to not only the characters themselves, but their towns, music, and environments. They'll each have their own problems and conflicts that you'll need to help them out with, and eventual dungeons to conquer. The dungeons in this game are actually pretty cool, with all of them taking place within the rifts, and actually reaching the dungeon within the rift is a task in itself. There's also smaller rifts where you'll have to go and find all of Tri's lost friends that are stuck within it, and completing each of them improves Tri's and Zelda's echo summoning abilities. And as usual, Zelda's music is fantastic. There's some familiar tracks that are changed up quite a bit, or given a bit of a different tone, and I absolutely love them. Echoes of Wisdom, while familiar in a lot of ways, feels like a breath of fresh air as a Zelda fan. Its unique approach to combat and exploration makes it stand out on its own compared to previous entries, and it's improved upon not only Link's Awakening's gameplay, but its art style and performance too. I still noticed a fair few chugs here and there, but I definitely feel like this game runs so much better than its predecessor. Difficulty wise, I do feel like this is a great entry point Zelda game. It does surely have some challenging moments and difficulty spikes, but it's definitely one of the easier Zelda games I've played. For me, this wasn't a bad thing. I had a nice chill and fun time playing through the game, and while at times I found some boss fights or sections a bit too easy, there was always another one that kept me on my toes or took me off guard. I'm gonna look back really fondly at my time with Echoes of Wisdom, and I really hope we see another Zelda game pop up that has Zelda as our main playable character in the future. Or even better, have both characters be playable. My ideal version of this would be something like Resident Evil 2. I know that's weird. I want it to be a thing where you play as both Link and Zelda, and they're in different places at the same time, and you can either play through 2 campaigns or switch back and forth to get the full story, with both having their own unique gameplay styles, interactions and perspectives on different events in the storyline. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And that does it for another episode. Let me know what you thought in the comment section below. Did you guys pick up Echoes of Wisdom, and do you want more playable Zelda in the future? I'd love to know. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon.